Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the FCCJ. I'm Mary Corbett. I have the pleasure of moderating this session today. I think it's a very timely session today we have with, to my right, it's Bhairavi Desai, President of New York Taxi Workers Alliance, Diogenes Carrasco, Uber driver from New York, and Kento Suzuki, who's our local representative who can answer a lot of your questions about what is happening with Uber in Japan. And he's a delivery partner with UberEATS. So I think each one of them have specific areas at which they are extremely expert. But I think you may have many questions outside of the particular topics which have been listed on the PAC announcement. So I'm very much looking forward to finding out more, and what a timely time. They've been in the news a lot, so you can ask all and any questions after their presentation. So we'll start with Bhairavi, please. Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. My name is Ravi Desai. I am the Executive Director of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. We are a union of close to 20,000 drivers in New York City, out of which about 5,000 to 7,000 drive for Uber or Lyft or one of the other app-based companies. So we're here today because Uber has caused great devastation to the livelihoods of working taxi drivers across the globe. In New York City, the biggest taxi market in North America, where drivers did earn a livable income because of 20 years of our organizing, we're today watching all of those gains be written out of history, all because of a company well-financed by Wall Street seeks to destroy our full-time profession and turn it into part-time gig work. At the heart of Uber's business model is lowering the rate of fare, flooding the streets with vehicles, and treating the drivers as independent contractors, even though Uber maintains control over them as if they are employees. Essentially, they're misclassifying the workers in violation of labor law. I think in most of the protests that you've seen across the globe, the protests have been about Uber's violation of taxi laws. And while that is of great concern to us, and should be to the riding public, because most of taxi laws pertain to consumer safety and caps on the number of vehicles that protect the environment and congestion. But I really want to talk to you about the violations of labor law. This is a business model where the workers are left at below minimum wage. So on one hand, you have a company amassing $60 billion. It's now the highest valuated company on Wall Street across the globe, although, of course, it has not been publicly traded yet. Meanwhile, in 3 major U.S. markets, the drivers earn less than $6 an hour and still have to pay for gasoline and vehicle expenses from those dismal earnings. In places like California, the San Francisco Chronicle has documented Uber drivers traveling 2 to 4 hours from their rural and smaller cities into markets like San Francisco and Los Angeles, sleeping in their cars overnight, ending up homeless because they have invested all of their savings to purchase the vehicles for Uber. So they purchase high-valued cars only to have those cars be devaluated and only to have the rate of fare be continuously cut. Uber uses bonuses to attract the drivers. $5,000 a month, for every month your first 6 months. And they tell the drivers that it's going to be take home. But in small print, the ads will tell you you have to work 60, 70 hours a week, and you are limited to certain neighborhoods. In fact, the Federal Trade Commission, under the current president, who's not exactly labor-friendly, actually fined Uber $25 million for false advertising to the drivers, where the FTC had documented incidents of drivers from all across the country who had invested into these vehicles only to be left bankrupt and in debt. In places like New York City, we had a member who filed for unemployment. His basis of unemployment was he was never deactivated by Uber. Uber never told him you will no longer be dispatch fares. His his basis of unemployment was that after expenses, there were several weeks where he earned as little as a penny a week after Uber deducted the vehicle expenses and the gasoline, because he was one of the drivers whose leasing was directly linked to Uber's leasing partner. That meant that at the end of the week, Uber would automatically deduct the cost of the lease and give that over to the leasing company. So this is after the drivers would lose their commission on the rate of fare and also have to pay for taxes and surcharges out of their fare. To us, a clear violation of tax law, and it's something for which we are suing Uber in federal court. And in fact, you may have heard back in May where Uber claimed that they made a mistake and they agreed to give back over $50 million to the drivers for money that they said they had wrongly taken from the drivers' pay. That payout of $50 million was a direct result of litigation by the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. So we've seen through our litigation, cases where many drivers are earning below minimum wage. This in a city which is Uber's biggest market, and in the city where drivers, after 20 years struggle, have established the best labor protections. We have so much to lose under this business model. Uber employs 33% more political lobbyists than Walmart. That's been documented by Bloomberg in a story they called How Uber Conquers a City. Uber uses those lobbyists to essentially silence, buy out any sort of opposition. Although the so-called platform economy represents less than 1% of the U.S. job market, because of the lobbying of companies like Uber, they are lobbying to essentially change labor law that would lower the conditions and remove labor protections for millions of workers across the economy, while directly destroying the livelihoods of professional drivers. The taxi driving profession is an incredibly difficult job. In the United States, you are 30 times more likely to be killed on the job when you're a taxi driver than any other profession. Time and again, they rank among the most vulnerable workers. Even in cities where they have employment recognition, they often do not have guaranteed income because they earn on the basis of commission and not as salaried workers. Uber has come into an industry of a vulnerable workforce that is also populated in many cities by mostly immigrants or rural workers. That means citizens of that nation that are already politically marginalized. And Uber is seeking to we believe, is coming into an industry like ours, counting on that vulnerability. We believe the reason that Wall Street and corporations are financing this company is so that it can be the corporate lobbying force to undo labor laws and usher in the so-called sharing economy or the gig economy or the platform economy. 30 years ago, taxi drivers in New York City were commission employees. When they had a bad day, the boss had a bad day. When they were assaulted on the job, the boss had to take care of their earnings. The companies had to provide for technology and equipment to provide them some safety on that job. As independent contractors, you are left completely insecure. All of the risks are placed squarely on the shoulders of workers who every day begin in debt and through the course of a year live in poverty. That is the business model that Uber is now looking to amass its billions, and it's on the blood and the sweat and the tears of a noble workforce that does a thankless job. Tokyo is a very important city in our global movement. 68,000 driver employees. That is unheard of in the taxi industry. It is an achievement that we greatly admire. And we see with the number of vehicles, the quality of the cars, the quality of service, that Tokyo has a superior world-class service. And if Uber were allowed to enter, that service will be degraded for the riding public, which will lose consumer protections and have lesser insurance in cases of accidents, while the drivers themselves will overnight go from employment to truly servitude. And so we come out of a solidarity for our brothers and sisters with whom we stand in their courageous fight to defend their profession and to defend their right to dignified working conditions. We also come with our own message for support to say to the people of Tokyo and to Japan, do not give a free hand to a corporation that is causing poverty and havoc in our great city. To one which we are fighting through litigation and mass protests. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Diogenes Carrasco. It is a privilege to be here in Japan. I've been a taxi driver for over 20 years. My experience working with Uber, it being a sour, it is a sour sometimes, but it being sweet and sour. Let me put it this way. Sweet, when they approached us, I was a yellow cab driver. They approached us to us and they offered us a good, very good bonuses for us to switch to them. At first, everything looked so brilliant, a brilliant future, a good technology. With the driver and the public, they were crazy about the new technology. We saw this, wow, this is good for our future. By then, when we started Uber, I was making weekly $1,500 to $2,000 a week. I mean, you say money. Everything was working so great. The new technology, everything. The customers, they were so happy because we have an accord with Uber, an agreement that we must provide a new car. So we invested in a new car. Everything was very smooth, working, making this amount of money weekly, like I said before, $1,500 to $2,000 a week. That was the first year. Then, after the first year, they dropped the rate. I was shocked. How come? After they promised us all this good stuff that we were, having through all this year, making this amount of money, we were having a good living wage. We were so proud of this company. But all of a sudden, I felt that they stabbed us in the back because there was agreement between two partners. We as independent contractors and then the investor. When there's an agreement, you must respect the other part. They didn't. When they lowered the rate, the first time was 15%. I said, what's going on here? What is this? And they didn't give us a correct answer. It was, I remember, like in the summer, oh, we want to attract more customers. We want you to have more customers during this time. I said, no, but that's not where we are working very, everything is working right so far. How come you made this change? And never was a correct answer to that. We kept working, but not that happy like before. In certain occasions, there were some customers asking us, come on, guys, what happened? Why they lower the rate? We don't mind to pay less money, but, we didn't ask for that. And you can see the connection. And then we keep working, then come the second year. They, again, drop the rate 20% more. In 2 years, they lowered the rate 35%. This time was really bad. Because for us to compensate the same amount of money that we used to make weekly, we had to work longest hour. I used to work between 8 to 10 hours. Then now I had to work 14 to 17 hours a day. That's not fair when you are a head of a family. You want to spend time with your family. You don't have to work almost 20 hours a day for you to make a decent living, for you to make some money to help your family, to help yourself. And then at that time, most of the drivers over there in New York City, we feel like we're stuck in this company because after the investment, because part of the deal, it was that we had to provide a new car for this company, and you have to invest money. All of a sudden, you see yourself like in the middle of nowhere, what to do? Because at the same time, when they lower the rate, they have more vehicles, more cars, more Uber drivers, because, of course, they attract more public. They need more cars. They flood the street with more cars, more Uber drivers, less money we're making. For us to compensate, we have to switch to other companies, like Juno, Lyft, they kind of Uber technology, almost the same thing, but at least they treat us better than Uber. I didn't come here to Japan to discredit any business investor. No, that's not me. I came here to Japan to be in solidarity with our brothers and sisters, taxi drivers here, that I can see there's a great rule and regulation here in Japan, here in Tokyo. We had that in New York. We are all bound by rule and regulation, but not then. Not then. I believe myself, I really do believe in equal business opportunity for all. We all have to play by the same rules. No, the small guy and the big one do whatever they want with the small guy. That's not fair. I hope this, what I'm saying now, help the drivers here in Japan to really understand who is Uber and not let them fooled by them. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. My name is Kento Suzuki. I work in Tokyo. 日本語で言います。デリバリー、東京で UberEATS デリバリーをしている鈴木と申します。昨年の10月3日から UberEATS の配達員を始めました。最初 Uber は、求人で時給2000円という広告を出し、さらに、配達員に対しては日給、3万5000円も稼げるんだというようなメールも送って、 古代広告を出し、当時は本当にそれくらい稼いでいた人もいるんですけども、わずか4ヶ月ぐらいで、報酬は半分になりました。今は3分の、はい。
My name is Kenta Suzuki. I have been working as a UberEATS delivery worker since October 3rd of the last year. At the beginning, my income was 2,000 yen per 時給2000円だったんですね。2,000 マイインカムが宣伝。
宣伝広告。
失礼しました。At the beginning, that the advertisement when Uber advertised that as a Uber delivery worker, you can earn 2,000 yen per hour, and then it says if you try your best, you can earn 35,000 yen per day as a Uber Eats driver. But the reality at the beginning, it was so far so good, but after 4 months of working for Uber, my income actually was halved.
報酬が下げられただけではなく、今はそのほとんど、そうですね、今は報酬が3分の1ぐらいまで下がっていて、場合によっては最低賃金を下回るような報酬体系にまで落ちています。
At the moment, my income has reduced to 1/3 of the starting income, and depending on the day, my income goes below the minimum wage.
報酬が下がるに比例して配達員は、求人を見てくる配達員がものすごく多く、爆発的に増えています。
As my income went down, the number of the Uber Eats delivery workers increased exponentially.
配達員が少ないときは仕事があり、報酬も高いのですが、配達員が多いときは仕事が何時間もないときもあります。
When the number of the workers is low, I get relatively good number of jobs. But when there are many Uber Eats workers on the street, I sometimes get no job for hours.
Uber はブーストによって実質的にブーストというインセンティブによって実質的に配達員をコントロールしていますが、配達員を個人事業主と扱っていて、事故が起きても一切責任を取りません。
Uber introduced new incentives recently called the boost system. So in this way, Uber is controlling its workers. However, on the other hand, they treat us as independent contractors. And even if we are getting involved in any accident, Uber refuses to take any responsibility.
私がコントロールしていると感じることの一つとしては、他に例えば仕事が多いときオフラインにして、Uber というのはいつでもオンラインにしてオフラインに好きな時にオンラインをして仕事を好きな時に働けるというのを売りにしていますけれども、実際は仕事がない時は報酬を得られることができないし、仕事が多い時はオフラインにしようとしても次の仕事が入ってきてオフラインにする前に、仕事を受けなければいけないのでオフラインできないことがあります。
Why do I think that Uber Eats is controlling me? It's because Uber said before when I worked for the Uber Eats, they said I can work anytime I like. It's my freedom that I can put my app on or offline anytime I like. But in reality, when there is no demand for the work demand. Even if I am put my app online, I don't get much job. On the other hand, when the demand is high, even if I want to get offline, Uber just doesn't let me offline because of a lot of work to do.
仕事 は呼び出しがあってから30秒以内にタップしない、応答しないとキャンセルになってしまい、キャンセルをしたり応答しなかった場合はどうなるかというと、応答率というので Uber は配達員を管理していて、応答率が下がると、あるいはキャンセルを繰り返していると、次第に仕事を受けられなくなり、最終的にはアカウントを停止させられてしまうというふうに会社から説明を受けています。
So when UberEATS contact me for delivery request, basically I need to respond within 30 seconds, and what will happen if I don't respond in 30 seconds? They are monitoring the workers' respondent rate, and if my respondent rate goes down, or sometimes if I don't respond within 30 seconds, my work will be cancelled. If I continuously get cancelled, or if my respondent rate continuously become deteriorated or lowered, in the end I will get less and less jobs, and then in the end my apps will be deactivated by UberEATS. That's what I was told by the company.
Uber は基礎報酬に時間帯に応じて、需要と供給に応じてインセンティブを加算するという方法をとっていますけれども、で毎週インセンティブを下げられ、毎週インセンティブは下がったり上がったりするんですけども、基本的には下がる方向になっていて、インセンティブが下げられるだけではなく、Uber は2月には突然基礎報酬まで下げて、さらに手数料を 25% から 35% に上げるということも行いました。
And Uber's my income consists of basic rate plus incentives. Incentives is decided by the demand, but Uber tends to sometimes incentives goes up, but most of the times incentive is deteriorated or lowered every week. And in addition to that, February this year, UberEATS all of a sudden unilaterally lowered that base rate, and plus they increased their commission from 25% to 35%.
私たちは今不安定で報酬も低い中、最低賃金ギリギリのような、報酬の中働いているわけですけども、そういう中から報酬の中から経費をさらに自分で捻出しなければいけません。
I have been working in quite precarious conditions like this, and my income sometimes goes below the basic minimum income, but out of this, my very little income, I have to also pay expenses.
私は、労災保険の適用外なので、事故を起こしても、人身保険を自分でかけていないので、自損事故や例えば自分が加害者になってしまった事故に対しては一切の保証はありません。
Because I am as independent contractor, I am not covered by workers' compensation insurance, and I am not taking out myself. I'm not taking out on an insurance when I cause an accident towards and involving other persons. So if I get involved in any accidents or I cause any accident that involves another person, that means I'm not insured at all.
私は2週間前追突事故に遭いました。その時ウーバーに報告したら、鈴木さんは個人事業主なのでウーバーは一切関与しないという回答を得ました。
それは自分が悪かった。
それは自分が悪くなかった。それは、もらい事故だったので自分に過失はありませんでしたので、自賠責ではサポートされました。
2 weeks ago, I was actually got involved. That was not my fault. I was got involved in a crash accident, and I reported to the company. But the company, the Uber, refused to take any responsibility and saying, "Mr. Suzuki, you are independent contractor. But I was covered by a compulsory insurance, so that was okay."
私の友人は仕事中に雨の日自分急ブレーキをかけて転倒し頭を強打し2週間入院し17万円以上の20万円ぐらいの医療費がかかりましたが全て自己負担になりバイクの修理代も自分で払わなければいけませんでした。
But one of my friend, also a UberEATS worker, got involved in an accident similarly, and because he used a sudden brake, and then it was a rainy day, and for 2 weeks he had to be hospitalized, and the medical cost was in total amounted to 200,000 yen, but he was not covered. She was not covered by the insurance, so she had to bear all the costs. Plus, she had to also pay the expenses to repair the broken motorbike.
今問題になっているようなこと、あるいは日本以外でもアメリカでも問題になっているようなこと、Uber は私たちが仕事を始めるときに一切そういうリスクについての説明はありませんでした。
When I started for UberEATS, the company never explained the issues that my colleagues mentioned before me, like any risks that UberEATS workers had to bear in case.
Uber は利益を得ているわけですから、やっぱり利益、そういう働き方をさせて何かトラブルが起きたらサポートするべきなんですが、Uber は労働者に配達員に対してサポートすることはなく、お客さんに対しても無責任な態度をとっています。
But because Uber are actually making a lot of profit through our services, whenever the workers are getting involved in any problems, they normally should support us. But they don't pay any attention to workers. They don't take any responsibility towards workers. But at the same time, I don't think they are responsible or they are taking care of customers.
例えば配達員はお客さんのところに行って10分間連絡が取れなかったら食べ物を廃棄していいことになっていますが、お客さんにお金は請求されます。
ごめんなさい。労働者が行って10分間
待っていたら、連絡をしてお客さんに10分待っていたら食べ物を捨てていいことになっているけれども、これは。
And it is the rule that だけど
Uber は
払わなきゃいけない。
だけお客さんはお金を請求される。
So the Uber sets a rule that when as a delivery worker goes to a restaurant and when the delivery workers gets waited for 10 minutes for the food, and it is said that なんだっけごめんなさい。Uber がその食べ物を捨てていいという。
捨てていいという。はい、そうです。
自分が
配達員がお客さんの食べ物を捨てていい。
And so when the delivery workers has to wait more than 10 minutes for the food, it is according to the company's rule that any delivery workers can discard the food. However, in such cases, the restaurant have to bear the cost of the food prepared.
お客さんが払う。
Customers have to pay the restaurants. Theお客さん注文してSorry. The customers have to pay the amount of the food destroyed.
日本でも世界でも Uber は特に日本では Uber はメリットばかり報道されてそういう問題がほとんど報道されていないのでそういう報道をしていただきたい。そして私たちももっと訴えていかないといけないと思います。
And in Japan, probably all the taken at the points made taken up by mass media as the benefit of the Uber services, but we need to spread more a negative side of this business model. At the same time, I'd like to ask the mass media of this country to take up the negative side of this business model.
ウーバー日本参入に、対抗していくために、あるいは労働者としての権利を破壊されないように戦っていくために、労働組合を結成して戦っていくということについて本気で真剣に考えていくために、ベラビーさんにもいろいろ教えていただきたいと思います。
And so now that the Japanese taxi workers are fighting against it in order to stem the inroads of the Uber taxi services, and the workers are making a desperate efforts to prevent the introduction of this business model. And as a UberEATS worker, I would like to take this issue seriously. I'd like to give a serious consideration to forming a UberEATS trade union here in Japan. And to that end, I'd like to take a lot of advice from this colleague here, from Ms. Bhairavi, and also from Mr. Carrasco.
ウーバーだけではなく、今、全業種で、労働者の個人事業主化というのが進んでいて、例えば、郵政や佐川は自分のところで労働者を雇わずに、業務委託化するということを進めていて、こういう個人事業主化ということを全体に対して問題提起していかなければいけないと思います。引き続きご注目よろしくお願いします。ありがとうございました。
So not only in the Uber, but also many transport companies, including Japan Post and the Sagawa Express, are now outsourcing the work and to leave the transportation work to so-called independent contractors. So we needed to. I would like you to vigorously watch the pros and cons of this new way of work as an independent contractor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it working? Okay. I think we want to go straight into the questions. Anything from the press first? Well, hi, Reed, どうぞ。
Hi, my name is Reed Stevenson. I'm from Bloomberg News. I have a hard time understanding why you're here, because the Japanese taxi industry is regulated, and so therefore Uber's actual transportation activity is rather limited to full-time employees. UberEATS is the only part of that that can be compared to what you would normally consider a sharing economy or ride sharing. So I guess the question is, what do you hope to accomplish by coming to Japan and talking about this?
Reed is he is from the law firm representing the. Okay.
So my name is Kawakami, a lawyer, and I've been organizing the citizens forum called なんだっけなうちの forum for safety and labor. But anyway, so my organization is working our aim is to kind of educate the public in Japan, because the government is trying to introduce Uber and ride-sharing service in Tokyo. And but what the media and the government is saying through this time is by introducing Uber here, it'll create jobs, and So, but they never mention the bad side, the opposite side of this sharing economy. So that's why we wanted them to come to Japan to tell the real story and real voice of workers to think carefully about the issue. So that's why we invited them to Japan.
Are you press? So any more questions from the press before we open it to the floor? Okay. では、どうぞ。Okay.
Mitsuya Goto. I'm a life member of this club since 5 years ago. I used to be with Nissan Motor Company for 20 years. And I heard like 3 years ago that all New York cabs became Nissan minivan types. Is this correct? And the other question is about the CEO of Uber. The guy who founded Uber was Travis Kalanick, and who evidently had sexual harassment and other issues within the company, and he was forced to resign in June. And the new guy who's running Uber is Dara Khosrow Shahi, who is originally from Iran, but he used to run a travel company. Is this correct?
Yes, in New York City, we have over 13,600 yellow taxi cabs. And a few years ago, when Michael Bloomberg was mayor, our regulator, the Taxi and Limousine Commission, passed a rule to have one standard taxi. Before, the TLC would approve of taxi models, and so there were many types of cars on the road. And then they decided to have just one prototype taxi cab, and after a long battle, many companies applied for that selection. Nissan won the contract. It has been controversial because the Nissan vehicle is not accessible. It's not built from the factory as an accessible vehicle. But because New York City also has a rule that by the year 2020, 50% of all yellow cabs must be wheelchair accessible, there are many issues raised with the quality of the Nissan after the vehicle is converted for accessibility. The CEO of Uber, Travis Kalanick, I mean, yes, he officially resigned. I think there is still speculation as to how involved he still is. Just a few days ago, there was controversy because he appointed 2 new board members who were very close to him. Even the new CEO was the candidate that he was closest to. And one of the main Uber investors, the first Uber investor, which also holds a board seat, Benchmark Capital, actually filed a lawsuit against Travis Kalanick because he's retained too much control over the company. He himself was not accused of sexual harassment. A woman blogger, a woman who used to work for, an engineer who used to work for Uber, wrote a blog about the level of sexual harassment and poor treatment of women in Uber. And of course, the poor treatment of women in technology companies in general has been a big issue. And because Uber tries to portray itself as a progressive new face for the modern corporation, her blog and the stories were very shocking for people. And her story came out just about a few weeks after Uber was highly criticized for trying to break a strike that our union, the Taxi Workers Alliance, had of our taxi cab members against the Muslim travel ban by President Trump. So the controversy was building up. In response, Uber hired a law firm to do an internal investigation about sexual harassment and racial harassment discrimination claims by Uber employees, not by the drivers, but by engineers and other, white-collar employees for Uber. As the report came out, at the same time, Uber had to file a response to a lawsuit against that Google filed against Uber regarding the driverless vehicle. That the Uber head of their driverless vehicle research group formerly worked for Google, and Google alleged that he took the files, the working files, from his work at Google. So there's been a very big federal lawsuit. In that civil suit, Uber filed papers acknowledging that the Uber CEO and founder, Travis Kalanick, was aware that this development head did indeed have copies of the Google files. At the same time, the other big story was that the head of Uber's Asia operation had somehow received copies of the medical records of a woman who was raped by an Uber ride-sharing driver in New Delhi, India. And so when it was revealed in the media that he maintained copies of the medical records and showed them around to all the high offices, including to the general counsel of Uber and the CEO of Uber, it was seen as both an ethical violation, that he was carrying the personal medical records of a rape victim, and he held on to the records because they believed at Uber that the woman made up the story, even though they settled with her over that incident. So there's many scandals all coming out exactly at the same time. When Uber tried to break our strike, they lost close to 500,000 customers, subscribers who deleted the app. So all of this was building up, along with the global protests and losses. There was a story about the Uber app called grayballing, a Uber program that Uber was using to deceive local police officers and regulators who were undercover taking an Uber vehicle. They would be sent a ghost cab on the app, and once they saw the car was close to them, Uber would cancel the trip. So all of these stories came out, and the scandals became overwhelming, and that's essentially what forced out the Travis Kalanick, even though he's still trying from behind the scenes to control Uber to the best of his ability.
Can we take?
Oh,
Yes.
Siegfried Knittel, freelancer from Germany. At first, what I want to ask, perhaps in New York. So, from all taxis in New York, how many % are Uber cars, and how many more traditional taxi companies? And then I want to ask, Uber is not only a taxi kind of a form of a taxi company. It's a much larger business of some delivery, and what kind of could you explain what kind of business they do?
sure.
Yeah.
So in New York City, we have 13,648 yellow cabs, these cars. And then there are another about close to 70,000 vehicles that we call black cars, that I believe in Tokyo they call the higher class. So to receive this base license as a black car, your requirements are much lower compared to the corporate license of a yellow taxi cab. For the yellow taxi cab, you must pay for the medallion, which at one point was valued at $1 million. For the black car license, we can all get together and apply for a black car base license. The standards are very low. The drivers can purchase the vehicles and the insurance. So, you have very little capital expenses as the corporation. So that is the model. New York City and London are the two major cities in the world where Uber came in under this model. Everywhere else in the United States, Uber operates purely as a ride-sharing company. Ride-sharing meaning they dispatch fares for hire to private motorists in personal cars. The driver does not need to be a licensed professional taxi driver. In New York City, all Uber drivers, like Mr. Carrasco, are required to be a licensed professional taxi driver. Uber is a transportation company. Uber likes to claim it's a technology company because that is how they can avoid transportation regulations in the taxi and for hire vehicle market. One of the main laws that they look to evade is regarding service for people with disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act, which was a landmark civil rights law in our country 25 years ago, required that in case for transportation, people with disabilities, whether they're visually blind or are deaf or are in a wheelchair, have the right to equal access for transportation. So Uber fights these lawsuits from the disability rights community by claiming they're not transportation, instead that they're a technology company. Same way that they fight taxi rules by saying, in fact, they're a technology company. So this is a myth that they have created to evade laws, which we clearly don't buy. UberEATS is in Tokyo, as Mr. Suzuki talked about. In the United States, they have Uber Rush. Also, they have Uber Rush in London. Uber Rush is for delivery workers, those on bicycles or those who walk. So they can deliver packages from corporations, or they can deliver packages for individuals, or they partner with restaurants for the Uber Eats program. In America, in New York City, we have the New York Messengers Alliance, which is a sister union of our union. And the messengers are facing the same loss of livelihood as the drivers are facing. That what was once in their industry, what was once secure employment and full-time living, people working 25, 30 years, is now become gig work with only part-time pay, no access to workers' compensation in case of injury. One of our members suffered burns on his back when he was riding his bike for delivery, and the soup came out of the bag and it burnt his back. Uber is fighting that workers' compensation claim, saying he's an independent contractor. Well, the soup didn't know this is a worker who's not going to have his injury covered. And it's truly dehumanizing that a $60 billion company would make such a dehumanizing legal argument.
Hi, is this on? Hi, Tamasu. I'd just like to ask one question. So with the very confusing structure and business model of contractors, subcontractors, if I'm the passenger in an Uber car, in your car,
Yes.
and we get into a terrible car accident, I don't care whose fault it was. Let's say it was your fault.
Yes. Yeah.
To make it simple. Okay. How much exactly are you covered, and does Uber present any kind of a safety net to the driver or passenger? This is very distressing to be hearing about all these very gray areas of the law.
One answer?
Okay.
All right, no problem. Okay. Okay, in New York City, part of the rules and regulations require us, the taxi driver to be fully insured. So that cover the passenger and cover us.
Exactly. So that's the New York City model, right? Because as I said earlier, Uber is in New York City under the as a black car company, what you call higher class here. Everywhere else where Uber operates as rideshare, which is the model they are lobbying to bring into Japan, they have what is called an on-off switch for insurance. So even though taxi laws required insurance to be 24 hours, 7 days, even if it's not the licensed driver who's operating the car, if somebody stole the car and there's an accident, the passenger must be covered. Under the rideshare insurance policy, there's one level of coverage if you hailed Uber through the app and there's an accident, then there's one level of coverage. If the driver was driving alone and they were just cruising looking for fares, but the app is on, then there's a second level of coverage for the driver, but also for any, if God forbid they have an accident. This happened in San Francisco where a little girl was killed and they fought for over 1 year because Uber would not cover it, saying he did not have a passenger. If the driver turned off the app and they're just driving maybe to a lunch break or to the bathroom or to go home at the end of a shift, there is no coverage for the driver or any private car they might hit or any passenger, any passerby walking on the street who might be hit. This is unheard of in the taxi industry. The other issue of security for passengers is that, again, in New York City, taxi drivers, in most cities across the globe, taxi drivers go through security clearance. They do criminal background checks on drivers by the local government, right, which has access to the full database of who has been arrested and convicted. Uber refuses to allow the local government to do the security background checks on the drivers. In Austin, Texas, Uber spent $10 million on a campaign to fight this requirement. Because when a government does security background checks, it can take up to 1 month or 6 weeks to clear the check. And for this ride-sharing business model, they depend on people, workers being unemployed, looking for part-time supplemental work. So they need to go through the labor doors very quickly. And so they have cut on these screenings. And it has resulted in some very high-profile incidents of rapes and assaults, of, even in Florida, where you can carry a gun in the United States, there is an incident of an Uber driver who shot the passenger after an argument, because these are not professionals who have been trained on how you deal with conflict with the customers, or how you learn to keep yourself safe in such a dangerous job. So so this level of deregulation, it puts the driver in danger along with leaving them penniless, and it degrades, it lowers the the customer safety and protections, that the taxi industry has had for decades. And if a company like Uber were, for example, to go bankrupt and not survive, what will happen to these regulations once you have taken them away? It's not the right way to build a service, an industry, or the economy.
Thank you. So we're just about, can you take one more question?
Sure. Yeah.
Quick,
Two questions.
quick question? Oh, and you want to follow. So, I don't know, 5-10 more minutes?
Sure,
Is that
sure.
okay?
Where-
Okay.
Hello, my name is Oliver Matthew from CLSA. Thanks for coming. I have two questions. One, you mentioned to begin with you had a good experience because of the technology. So I'm interested in your experience as a driver. What are some of the innovations that these kind of businesses do bring along? And the second question, so you're not very happy with Uber. So what ideally would you like to change in New York? What would make you happy? Thanks.
Okay. Of course, the new technology is one of the best things that happened to us as a taxi driver, because the technology allow us to identify the customer. It also connected to GPS that you can be anywhere. You're not even know where you are. So all of a sudden, you get a call by a customer, you go straight to the customer without knowing where you are, because, like I said, connected to the GPS automatically. That's the best thing to ever happen to us. I can speak as a driver.
So two things. One, from the New York City regulators, we are looking for specific regulations to limit the number of vehicles, to stop the race to the bottom, and to put a minimum rate of fare requirement so these companies cannot continue to drop the bottom. From Uber, we're looking for an end to the misclassification of drivers as independent contractors. Uber needs to recognize that its workers are indeed employees and grant them full rights under labor law, whether it be the right to minimum wage and overtime or the right to collective bargaining and unionization.
Thank you. And you had last question? This is being live streamed.
So, is the Uber business still growing? How the percentage of do they win market share, perhaps in New York, with their model against the traditional taxi companies? How does this development?
Well, you can imagine, they have over 60,000 vehicles compared to 13,000 for the traditional medallion yellow cabs. But it's quite a race to the bottom. Yellow cabs, in New York City, yellow cabs, black cars, what we call neighborhood liveries, all in total serve about 1 million people every single day. And for years, over 450,000 of those trips would be completed just by yellow cabs. 24/7 world-class service that the yellow cabs provide. Today, the numbers are closer to 400,000 trips a day. And one thing that the New York City, after a very long study, found is that the total number of trips completed by companies like Uber and Lyft are almost exact to the number of trips that the yellow cabs have lost. In other words, these apps are not growing the market as they claim. What they're doing is replacing a regulated industry which is what for many of the medallions, there are two types of medallions. There's the corporate and then there's the individual. Individual medallions are owned by individual drivers. They work the same as Theo and over 100,000 drivers. They labor 12 hours a day. They're hardworking men and women who invested all their savings in this permit. And today they're facing bankruptcy. They're facing housing foreclosures because many of their loans they linked to purchasing their homes, or they invested in apartments. They're facing a loss of their future as they no longer have the prospects of retirement, which they believe that their investment would yield for them. I mean, it's really devastating. It's a level of crisis. What's interesting, though, is, while Uber's, I think, growth in the market has, at one point, was very rapid, but it's begun to plateau. It only grows when the owners, the medallion owners, corporations or individuals go further into bankruptcy, so there's less vehicles on the streets. And that's now become the reason why the market share of Uber and Lyft will continue to climb. But the reason I say it's interesting is that regardless of what happens with the market share, these companies are not making any profit. So I think the real question, particularly for those of you that cover, business journalism, the real question here is how long will Wall Street continue to invest into a business model that is not yet showing to be viable? It doesn't turn a profit. It can only attract drivers and customers when it spends historic numbers on bonuses. When that money dries up, what's going to happen to these companies? And then meanwhile, the taxis that have been serving that city for generations, have continued to do this work, are slowly evaporating, disappearing because of the bankruptcies, all due to the lack of equal regulation.
Okay. So I would like to thank our speakers, a real eye-opener. Thank you very much for all that information, and I think we can put it to good use maybe in the Japanese media and educate the public. So thank you very much.
Thank you.